Good afternoon. I'm Mr. Gomez. I'm the Director of 911 for Hidalgo and Willacy County. My counterparts from Cameron County haven't shown up. So I'll go through their session as close as possible. We do have this list that you can, if you don't want to speak out and you want to write your comments, it'll be up here. Hopefully you signed in. I have two staff members that will be helping me, Roy Martinez and Raul Madero. Roy Martinez is one of our GIS people. He's a planner 1 and Raul is a planner 2. I'll start with the vision statement. The Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council established itself as a front door to the global marketplace because of its strategic location between Mexico, Canada, and the state of Texas. During the planning process of establishing goals and objectives for the original strategic plan, the following vision statement was discussed and established. As the international front door to the global marketplace, the Lower Rio Grande Valley Development Council is committed to ensure regional prosperity and sustainability to all sectors, enhancement of quality of life and security of its residents. And us being so close to the border, that's something that's very important to us that nobody understands and nobody really knows unless they live down here in the valley. South of San Antonio, we really don't exist. The valley also recognized that in order to remain competitive as to diversify its economy, support small business development, increase its technology capabilities, and maintain its labor force competitiveness, employability. These issues are crucial to the valley's economic future. And what I'd like to say about that is this, you know, most of the valley, we always talk about what we want, but we really never do anything about it. And this is something that's maybe politically motivated, but if we don't get the people that change the rules and the regulations, we're never going to accomplish anything. Listed are the trends: diversified international markets, recognition of tourism as growth industry, increasing tax burdens, increasing technology capabilities, small business remains as primary employers. And in saying this, this is something that has really caused a burden on a lot of small employers because we don't have as many small employers as we used to have. Increasing demands for substance abuse services. Down here in the valley, we have very few of a lot of these things that we're hoping that we can get down here. Rising crime rate, as you all know, crime rate is something that we're so close to the border, and of course, all our elected officials keep trying to tell us that we don't have a border spill, that the crime from Mexico is not spilling over. I think they're wrong, but that's just my personal opinion. Do we have any comments or anybody that wants to add anything to it? Assets. The strategic geographic location that offers economic opportunities. As you all well know, a lot of the people from up north are coming down here. And we can provide anything and everything they need, but we need to be prepared for it. We need to educate our younger people because we're losing our young people to the northern, they're not going to come down here and work for $7 or $8 an hour when they can go to Austin or Houston or San Antonio and work for 2 times, maybe 3 times as much as they would down here. We have the capabilities of doing a lot of this, having a lot of this, but we really haven't really worked at it. And I would say us as leaders of the community, we ought to be doing something to improve our economic situation. The challenges. We have unemployment rate. Why do we have unemployment rate? Because, and I'll be the first one to tell you, a lot of us with the economic situation that we have, We'd rather have somebody that's not qualified and hire them as long as the wages are low. And that's one of our biggest problems that we have down here in the valley. Raw water, I think Marcy's going to cover that water quality and quantity in her session. Access to comprehensive health care services for the economic disadvantaged. Affordable standard transition housing, that's something that, you know, we're working on. Anything that anybody want to add to this thing, let us know. Make a comment about it or put it down on the sheet, and we'll be more than glad to make a correction on it or additions to it. I want to start on our 911. Cameron County is not here, so I want to go basically, they're pretty much the same as our goals in Hidalgo and Willacy. To provide a direct access to public safety agencies, enhance 911 safety, not to next gen 911. And that's something that we keep talking about, next generation 911. And one of the problems that we have is nobody really understands what next generation really means. Everybody looks to, we're going to go and open a box or a door, and there it's going to be. It's going to be trial and error. And nobody is willing to pay for the trial and error. They want it already there. Provide location validation function for 911 call routing and 911 address validation. Continue public education programs and dispatch and training. Educate and encourage the public to register for reverse 911. That's in Cameron County. I don't think there's anything that they are covering that we don't have in our plan. Okay, Hidalgo and Wilson County. Encourage efficient access to emergency care and public safety service. And this is something that we're really going to have to get involved, because I don't think anybody really understands the 911 unless you call 911 and you have an emergency. I don't think anybody higher up than us really understands what 911 is. You always hear 911 failed. What they don't understand is that the 911 system is like an iceberg. You only see the top and you don't see the bottom. What we have in 911 is what we call a system that the state pays for our calls, for our equipment, but it doesn't pay for the ambulance, it doesn't pay for the second responders. And they call them first responders, and I keep trying to emphasize that the first responders, which is the ambulance and the fire department and even the police, would never be or go anywhere if it wasn't for the call taker to take that call and dispatch them. Now, we have down here in the valley a mixture of, as a matter of fact, we don't have any call takers. They're all dispatchers. And when I say dispatchers, I mean they're all dispatch. They're either jailers, they provide the secretary duties, they do everything else, and 911 just happens to be a sideline for them. We're in an area that desperately needs to have that change. And it's not going to change overnight. It's going to have to be from the public to tell us, you know, you need to change. And and I've been criticized a lot for trying to change some of the things that are being done in 911, because I've been told if it's not broke, why you're trying to fix it. Not unless you call 911 and really have an emergency are you going to realize how inefficient the 911 system really is. Because when you call 911 on your cell phone, you're putting your life on the line, because there's no telling where the cell phone is going to go, where it's going to route. So if the tower that it bounces to happens to be busy, it's going to bounce to another tower. And if that other tower is busy, it's going to bounce to another tower. Now, the FCC, which is the Federal Communications, which writes the guidelines for the cell phone companies, just made it possible for a lot of these cell phone companies not to give us accurate information. You take the counties of Brooks, Kennedy, since population is not there, there's no telling what the location is going to show on the cell phone. I've been asked, what about if I make a 911 call and I'm on the road? What should I do? And I says, your best thing to do is tell the dispatcher you're just calling from a 911, you're calling 911 from a cell phone, and don't hang up on me, because there's no telling. Because if you hang up, there's no telling who's going to answer your phone next time. Now, right now, what's happening, because when a lot of the cell towers were put in, which was some years ago, you only had 5 or 6 lines that directed where your cell phone was going. So we're having calls being made in the eastern part of the county that are bouncing all the way to the western part of the county. And when the 911 dispatcher answers and it says 911 La Jolla, you say, La Jolla? I'm in Weslaco. I says, yeah, but your phone call just called La Jolla. And he's having to transfer because a lot of people don't know their exact address. And if you use your mail delivery, which is the worst address you can use, because mail delivery is strictly for mail delivery. It's not your location where you, and I have Mercedes that delivers into Weslaco, Weslaco delivers into Mercedes, and a lot of people, when they call 911, they use their mailing address, and that's wrong. So these are just a few things that people need to know. Public education, and Roy's going to cover a little bit on public education, is something that we need to make the public aware. Now, one of the statements that I want to do is we are one of the few 911 departments that have mapping GIS departments implemented throughout the state of Texas. We are able to generate all GIS data needed for 911 systems. And we're trying to help all the cities as much as possible with GIS. Go ahead and make comments about it.
Good afternoon. My name is Raul. Good afternoon. Much better? My name is Raul Madero, and I'll do the addressing with, well, I'm one of the addressers for Hidalgo and Willacy County. When we talk about addressing, as Mr. Gomez mentioned, we're talking about a 911 physical address, which is an address that is based on a number to a given road, not a service road and not a county road, but to a named road, and that we can attach to a city and a zip code. The neat thing about that is that as we assign an address to someone, let's for instance, somebody calls, wants an address in Lyford. We issue an address. We can plot the address on a map. We can give it an XY coordinate on that address. And more important, we can get a 911 responder to that particular address. All addresses go into a database, and that database will keep track of names and phone numbers if the person that called has a landline number. Landline numbers, even though they're kind of old and old-fashioned, are really important in the sense that when a 911 call taker gets a call stating an emergency, they'll be able to see the person's name, they'll be able to see the person's phone number, and more important, an address. With that address will be assigned an emergency service number, which is an ESN. An ESN has the ability to recognize the EMS service, the law and fire responsible to answering a 911 call to that area. So addressing is a little bit more than just a simple address number and a street. The addresses that we assign for 911 are outside the city limits. We don't really get involved unless asked to help with addressing inside city limits. Now, having said that, for instance, Ed Couch right now, we're currently trying to help Ed Couch reassign addresses because they're installing new water meters, and then they want new 911 address with a water meter, so we've been helping them. But typically, we'll address outside city limits and out in the county area. So in as far as what I've just mentioned right now, is there any questions on addressing? Yes, ma'am.
I guess my biggest question is this different in Cameron County?
It should not be different in Cameron County, although from experiences with dealing with Cameron County, we seem to do things a little bit faster in Hidalgo County than Cameron. Cameron wants, I'll give you an example. If you call our office right now requesting a 911 address, more often than not, we can give you an address within half an hour or maybe even sooner. If you call Cameron County, they may take a little bit longer because they require a written application for you to request through them, or that's the way it used to be in the past. A written application from you to be able to give you an address, where you would state your property ID number, your tax account number, you know, the location where you're at, and all of this that's related to you getting an address. We do the same thing, but because we have GIS, and again, we talked GIS earlier this morning, since we have GIS capabilities in our office, then we're able to get all of that, either going through the Hidalgo CAT Appraisal District or the Willacy Appraisal District.
I guess I won't claim to be aware of how government works, but I do know we have different counties and so forth. But from a regional perspective, does it not make sense that we would want to try to standardize our 911 so that anybody calling in Cameron County would get almost the same response that they would get if they called it in Hidalgo County? I mean, I've heard people say, you know, I've called 911 and they didn't show up, or they called back, they didn't know where we were. And so I'm scratching my head about, and then I'm seeing two different plans in here, and it doesn't look like that's where we should be going. It looks like we should be standardizing.
But I
something
think
as critical as this.
I think you only got half an answer from whoever you were talking to, and let me explain that. And what I'm going to say is again, typical. I don't like it, but it's typical. John Doe calls, we give him an address because he wanted an address to satisfy either getting an insurance to get wind and storm damage, or maybe to renew his license. A variety of reasons. He may want it that address. The problem becomes, though, is that they don't post the address. We ask them to please post the address either at the entrance or on the side of the house. Usually that doesn't happen. Another problem with an address is they may have a route number, route and box number someplace. They'll put the address on that box, on the mailbox, but that mailbox may not be directly in front of his house or her house. It may be someplace else down the street. Another thing is that not all emergencies happen during the daytime, they happen at night. And if you put your address in numbers that little on a mailbox, they're not going to see it. They're not going to see it. So when I say you only got maybe half a story, that's probably, I'm probably not too far off from that. We try to do the best we can, trying to get an emergency responder to get to your house, but also 80% of the calls that are being made for 911 are cell phones. Somebody calling on a cell phone. If it plots correctly, it's great. If it goes phase 2 right away, that's even better. We earlier, I want to say earlier for me was like about maybe 4 years ago, we were working with the cell phone providers to try to get them phase 2 ready. And they had to be within a certain tolerance for us to be able to say, okay, you're phase 2. The talk now is that they're not going to be giving us that information. That's going to hurt us trying to get someone to you, but by golly, that's going to hurt each and every one of us when we have an emergency. Because if I look at all, including me, all of us right now, how many of you got cell phones? All of us do. And unfortunately, they don't work that well. How many of you have seen in Willacy County all those wind turbines? You know that all those wind turbines have got addresses? Every single one of them has an address. Every single one of them has an XY. Every one of them. But if one or two of us were working in one of those cell towers and we have an emergency, chances are if you use your cell phone to call, it's not going to route to the Raymondville Police Department. It's going to route to either Olmito, and I had even one route to Hidalgo SL. So what they do over there is they use radios. But a radio's not going to help you in 911 because we don't take radios on 911, do we? So there's no way. There's a lot to be done, but you can't fault everything on an address. So at some point, all of us have got to get involved, as Mr. Gomez said, politically. Any other questions?
Well, doesn't it make sense though that if we're all, our society is now going into cell phones, just about everybody under the sun has cell phones, that software, Find My Phone, it should be in phones, so everybody. That way, you look up an address or whatever, it finds your phone. You know where you're at.
And whose responsibility do you think that would be? The cell phone provider, right?
The cell phone provider.
Okay. Do you think he's doing anything about it?
Well, maybe in the future, if there's enough.
That's right. If there's enough outcry and if people get involved and question.
Yes, absolutely, and they'll charge us for it. I know I have that in my phone. And I can find my phone from my computer at home and find where my phone is at if I lost it. So to me, it's a very good system. The other is not having to do anything with the calls, but actually the drivers of the ambulance or fire. I'm going to say ambulance, because from one experience that I had, is hiring drivers that are new from another city or another county and do not know the road map at all, and they're driving. That is so scary because they're trying to find out, get themselves oriented as to, where is this street?
Yeah.
And it's my understanding that as a driver working for an ambulance service or providing an ambulance service or emergency services, you're supposed to know the streets quite well. You're supposed to know that map very well. To be able to get there fast within those minutes that you have, which are very limited. And I know it happened with my dad. He had a heart attack, and it took him forever. And yet the EMS people in Brownsville were right there, like about not far from his house. And I asked him, why did you take so long? And it was too late, by the way, by the time they got there. It was too late. And the guy said, well, I'm from Riondo, and I didn't know the street, so I got up on the expressway. And I got lost, and then I had to get off and come back. I said, but you were right here downtown, where my dad is at. It's not like out there in the boonies or on unknown street or anything. He was just new, and he didn't know the streets, and he got lost. And my attitude was, you shouldn't have put a driver that didn't know the map system from that city to drive an ambulance on a 911 call. And so that's the other issue, to make sure that the people are qualified. Now, you talked about GIS. Cameron County has a GIS system, and we also have the ESD, the Emergency Services District, where we contract with fire and EMS services with the cities, and of course they have the volunteer fire departments. And we work with 911 on the map. And we have fire zones and EMS zones. I'm sure you're aware of that? Yeah. Okay. I hear that there's some differences sometimes because if a fire zone or we updated the map doesn't come into your department right away and gets approved, then you don't have that information.
We have it.
I'm told on the 911.
Yeah, let me explain a few things. First of all, on the ambulance, and my condolences on your loss of your dad, but we don't hire the ambulance services. The city's contract for the ambulance services. There's 3 types of ambulance services, depending on which one the city's contract for. And some of them, to be honest with you, are no more than glorified taxi services. I don't know what kind of requirements they have for the drivers, but certainly I agree with you, they should have some type of requirements. They should have some type of equipment to help them along, you know, trying to find a road or a street. They should. But we don't tell the cities who they can hire and who they can contract with and who they can't. I wish we could. We could then, you know, look at or monitor their training, their abilities, and their continued education. We don't have that ability. And now the other one, and you mentioned GIS. GIS is always evolves, and it's always I think, going to be in a constant state of needing to learn, and needing to learn how to use it and how to best use it. For Cameron County, you know, they don't send information to us. Cameron County is solely responsible for Cameron County. So their GIS department, their addressing department, their planning department, it's unique to Cameron County. Maybe someday, you know, all of us can get together as 3 counties, and I'm sure we would welcome that. But right now, for the LRGVDC and our 911 department right now is Hidalgo and Willacy County. So, but in as far as information, sharing their information or emergency service numbers or their fire boundaries or any kind of those, you know, zones typical to getting a responder, then they're typical only and related only to Cameron County, and that would be different from Willacy and Hidalgo.
Let me touch a bit, because, you know, regionalism is something that, you know, it's on my mind, and we call it TIES 3, and I'm trying to establish, starting as far as Victoria, coming down to Corpus, which is coming down to us, going up toward Rio Grande City, all the way to Middle Rio. And I'm trying to establish where we can, if a call can be transferred all the way from here to Victoria, or as far as to Uvalde, we can all be together. And like I mentioned before, south of San Antonio, we really don't exist. Nobody really knows what's going on. When I moved into the valley back in 1970s, McAllen was less than 30,000. McAllen is over 134,000 right now, so that tells us how much we've grown in a few years. So I've got this vision that 911 needs to improve itself. And we can only improve with people that have called 911 and have, for one reason or another, they feel like it failed, for us to get involved and do something about it. Because right now, and as a matter of fact, when I was talking to my executive director today, Cameron County is a district by itself, and they get all the money. The 50 cents is collected on every telephone or item, you know, goes straight to Cameron County. Lower Rio does not have that, okay? Lower Rio, all the fees are collected. They go to the state of Texas, and the state of Texas dishes that out whatever they want. They had over $100 million that belongs to the 911 in the state of Texas, and they use it to balance their budget. And they're not going to give it to us. I mean, it's in paper. So somehow we need to get involved. And the reason that Cameron County is a district, because when 911 got started back there in the late 80s, Cameron County jumped on it and they became a district. The rest of the valley, Hidalgo and Willacy, kept playing around, and it was, you know, till later on that they became a COG. And it's a consortium, and we have 3 separate entities that take care of 911. We have districts, which is Cameron County. We have local communities like Corpus that are by themselves, and they call them. And then we have us, COGS. And that's the disparity. And it was something that happened many years ago. How we're going to get together, and because it's happening. It's growing in leaps and bounds, and not only are we having the same problem, but you can imagine the people that live in Brooks County where the cell phone companies it doesn't generate any money for them, so they really don't care. When somebody's lost in Brooks or Kennedy County, it's hard to find them. And you know, the cell phone companies, and I understand what a cell phone company is doing, because they're looking for the mighty dollar, okay? So if there's no money being generated, they're not going to improve their system. Roy, you want to say a little bit about public awareness?
So I think this was a good opportunity for us to learn a little bit about the 911 system. A lot of us didn't know that there are 3 types of planning agencies here in the state of Texas: the communication districts, the regional planning commissions, and then the home rule cities. With us being a home rule city, a lot of it becomes we have plans in place. Now finding the funding and the resources to make some of those plans a reality becomes a challenge, and I think we've done a good job in our region doing that. A large part of our program is to encourage the efficient access of emergency care and public safety services. Right, so we're talking about the coordination of local, state, and federal agencies. Now, we talked about dispatching. We've talked about the complete progress of a 911 call. From that time that 911 call comes in, on the network infrastructure that we have put in place, on the equipment that we have procured and put in place, where the call taker handles that call with the training that we have put in place. Once that call gets dispatched out, let's say that's an ambulance call, it gets dispatched out to an EMS, that EMS provider does not get any of the bells and whistles that come with that initial 911 call. Okay, so that longitude and latitude that we talked about, that Find My Phone feature, that we have that at 911. But when we transfer that out to a secondary responder, an EMS or a fire responder, they no longer have access to that information, and that's the way that certain requirements are set in place. Now, how does that come to change? Obviously, by educating our state lawmakers and our legislatures, right, and our state representatives, to let them know that these are things that we would like to see change on. And part of that comes through public awareness, public education, and letting those who are allowed to lobby do so, right? So again, we've identified weaknesses and areas where we can improve our 911 system, and we'll continue to work to make those improvements. Right, so we had talked about earlier about Cameron County being so close to the LRGVDC, and it only makes sense that we kind of standardize our data. And we do want you to know that we are in the works of standardizing our data schemas, and that can be challenging to say the least. And I'll give you an example. If Cameron County has their GIS set up and a street name is called street name in theirs, but in our system it's called road name. It's a very, very small concession to make, but a lot of times when you work with other agencies, you'll know, well, why do we have to conform to this certain data standard? If we've done it this way for so long, and all of a sudden now, not only Cameron County's 911 system works off of that GIS, but their public works may work off of that. So now we're not only affecting one area, one agency, right, but many agencies. And so what we're doing currently is working towards an EGDMS, which is a database management system that's going to help kind of align all of our data. And like Mr. Gomez was mentioning, not only in our region, but all the way up to extensive Victoria and on the western side Uvalde. Because our thinking is if we get a Cat 5 hurricane, and Manny, you can attest to this, Cameron County is pretty much going to be underwater. Everything up until 77 is going to be flooded out. And so your residents are still going to demand service, and we're making sure that we're in a position to provide that service if that call does come to order. So. This is one that's near and dear and close to my heart here, is the public awareness of the 911 program. Obviously, there's a lot that can be shared about public education in regards to 911, and the way we see that is training for our call takers and public education being two sides of the same coin. We can build a better mousetrap. We can build a great network infrastructure that's ready to take all kinds of calls. But if our call takers are not trained, well, then there's a shortcoming there. And we work hard to make sure that our call takers have the training available to them if they choose to take advantage of it. The flip side of that is that our public then needs to understand what the limitations of our current service are, what the best ways to reach out to their public answering points would be, and some of the challenges that they may experience during that call process. And so again, we do believe strongly in public awareness and community education. So the ways that we plan to continue doing that are participating in public outreach events with other public safety agencies. So this means teaming up with local, state, and federal agencies. I believe we currently have a presence out at the Hurricane Fair that's going on in McAllen. You know, we try to make it out to as many community events because like Mr. Gomez said and like Raul said, there is no emergency season, right? We have a saying in 911 that our work day is your worst day. And that's truly what we do, is prepare to take the call that we hope you never have to make. And so the summer months become very, very busy for us as we try to get into library, summer reading programs when the kids are going to be alone and maybe not as supervised as they would be during the school year, identifying areas of need and then providing resources to fill those voids. Visit and schedule presentations at daycares for children and senior citizens, boys and girls clubs, schools, and other venues. These are some of our demographics, but definitely any opportunity we get to address the public on some of the needs and changes that are going on our 911 system, it's prudent of us to be there. And so we'll continue to do so. We hope that if there are any events that come about where there will be a large public gathering, we hope that you do let us know and allow us to be a resource out there. Is there anything that I've covered that I can kind of elaborate on or answer any questions? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, on the public awareness, I think you should include the cable companies.
Okay.
Time Warner is big, and so some of the other local cable companies that are in our area, they could play a role in education for 911. One of the things is, like, I have a landline, my internet, and my cable, which is 3 services from Time Warner. And on the landline, one of the reasons I have it is for the 911, because I'm told that sometimes they can't find you with your cell phone, so I have that. However, I noticed that when the cable goes down, you know, especially during the hurricane, the whole cable, everything goes down, including my phone, everything. I don't have anything. I worry that if there was an emergency going on in my house and the phone is dead. The only thing I do have would be the cell phone. That's all I have.
And I think that, I'm sorry, go
They
ahead.
need to work on that and educate us as to what to do or something, because that is something to think about. That they need to either prepare their transformers or whatever is going on that happens, because I know in Cameron County, I live in Rancho Viejo, and a small storm or whatever, we're with no lights.
Right.
And they say it's a transformers. So if it takes the utility company to work on that, and also us, the residents, to work, let's say, on the brush,
Right.
to keep it from the trees or whatever, we need to do it before the hurricane season.
Right.
So that we have, this communication service.
Absolutely, and I did want to touch on that, and that was a great example of how sometimes our service providers may not be forthcoming with certain information. One of the things that raised a concern was that you said it's all bundled together, and that when the lights go out, everything goes out. What you've described to me is not a classic landline copper line. It is a voice over IP or a voice over internet protocol. And what that means is that you have the false sense of security that that's a landline. However, when your internet goes out, that phone's going to go out as well. Now, on a copper line, on a traditional copper line, you would be able to plug into the jack, even if there was no dial tone, and still dial 911.
So is that AT&T?
It depends. The situation you've put forth, I would say Time Warner has had similar issues, but it's a matter of talking to your telephone provider or your service provider and getting a clear understanding of what the limitations of their system is. Because if we've seen Vonage come on, 1999, dial everywhere, dial as long as you want, but if you look on the bottom of that screen, and in 911 we're always trained to go to the fine print, right? And so the bottom of that will say your 911 service may behave differently than a traditional landline telephone. And so these are all things that in the hustle and bustle of everyday life, sometimes we miss. Has anybody in here talked to their children about 911 in the last 2 months? 6 months, we got one person. And so a lot of times that's no fault on us, right? We're busy as parents and maintaining a home. Our schools have lost that resource, right? With the budget cuts that have come in, some of those extracurriculars. And so as a planning commission, as a COG, we are trying to fill that void as best we can. And like I said, in addition to the children, the daycares, the adult centers, it is businesses. It is, working individuals that need this information, because like I said, you may have an impression that you are in the best scenario for taking a 911 call when it could be a small adjustment or just some clarification that might save you some headaches or preserve life or property when the time comes. So.
Well, I'm told that if you have like the older phones that you just plug into plug, that maybe your other phones that you have that are the cordless, those will go off completely. But the other
Right. If it has a tail and you plug it into the wall, yes, you should still get service.
You still have.
For a while, yes. Now, you can imagine if we have a situation where, like at Dolly, where it sat over us for a couple of days, well, generators only have so much power to go on, right? And eventually they're going to run out of fuel. Eventually we're going to lose power completely. And so for a short time, yes, you will. The other thing right now being hurricane season is we're encouraging the public, like you said, be prepared, because if everybody who's in the path of a tornado wants to call 911 about a tornado going on, the stress on the infrastructure, the stress on the personnel that causes. And then what we have is outside responders coming into the area. Texas Task Force 1, the Red Cross coming down into our area. And like you said, like the brand new ambulance driver there, they're not going to know where your street is. They're going to depend on road names, on addresses based on ranges. They're going to get down to the mathematical when it comes to locating you. And so again, I'm sure you can understand now the public awareness and public education program is very vital, right? Because it doesn't matter how smart the system we build, if our residents aren't prepared to use it, then we've fallen short, and we refuse to do so.
Okay, so add on there the potential resources for cable companies. I don't think they're on there.
Local media outlets, you would say?
Yes,
Okay.
because you don't have that on there.
Okay, thank you.
I have several comments.
Okay.
And actually, going back to the very first goal,
Okay.
which is to encourage efficient access to the emergency care and public safety services. And it seems that if our goal is to achieve regionalization, that we should be looking at how to develop a plan to achieve that.
Okay.
And in other words, laying out a roadmap for how do we get there. If it's going to take us 20 years to get there, well, at least we're all aware that it's going to take 20 years.
Absolutely.
I don't think right now we really have that, nor do those of us sitting in this room really understand the difficulties that you all are having.
Right.
They're very real to someone that is
Right.
having an emergency. So I would say that one of our strategies should be that we start that process.
Right.
Of how do we get that regionalization to happen?
And I think that on our side, you know, the process has already started. Where I'm seeing maybe we can improve is updating the public and making you guys aware as progress is made and as this process goes on. Like you said, it's the public who initiates change. And so if we run into certain roadblocks, perhaps to make that information available to the public. Yeah,
Well,
absolutely.
And I think it also feeds into the whole discussion of education of our legislatures. And that would be part of that regionalization is that there would then be mass education that would go out to those people that are influencing that decision. Along the same line, we should be looking at some kind of a strategy to work with our cell providers in establishing phase 2. If that is a barrier, because that's the reality of how people communicate. And you know, the fine points of, you know, reading this and, you know, understanding what a landline is and voice over IP and all of that, most people don't understand that. And so we need to take the system as the public is using that and put that system in place. And that sounds like, if I heard you use the terminology correct, phase 2 is where we need to go. So, you know, again, part of that regionalization
Right.
is, besides education, is also making that statement of we want to get phase 2 in place.
And I appreciate the comment, absolutely. Just to clarify, I did want to say we are currently phase 2 compliant. We have been since, I believe, 2009. What Raul and Mr. Gomez were pointing to was that we can be phase 2 this month in a certain sector of our region. The telephone company can then go remove an antenna from that tower, place it somewhere else in a location of higher traffic, and then all of a sudden, well, the game changes. There's variables there that weren't there before, and so it's almost like a cat and mouse game always. We do currently, and what phase 2 means, I try and stay away from those technical terms, what phase 2 means is that we have the ability to locate a handset, your actual phone, down to within about 350 feet. Now, phase 1 was we could only identify the tower where your cell phone was, where your signal was hitting. And so we have made strides and I think a big part of that is communicating the progress that we've made and then kind of making it available in terms that, you know, every resident can understand. And I think, you know, we can absolutely make some improvements on that.
But if your barrier is also that they're moving a tower or something that takes it down, then again, coming back to there needs to be a discussion of how do we improve this communication, because what fails is what impacts our public.
Right.
And so it's working within those providers if that's what it's going to take. You know, so that's just part of that whole regionalization to me in you know, looking at how can we better work together. Also, I'd like to look at your measures on that, because when I look at, those are pretty high level measures. Bottom line to me is, you know, how long does it take for the call to be dispatched, and then how long does it take for them to get there? And I understand there's rural and there's urban and there's those factors, but nonetheless there is, you know, some knowledge of that, and that to me is really a measurable outcome that we want to know in our area.
Absolutely, and you know what, I think we've seen in recent years, even reports that have hit the news media about 911 failing in certain areas, and what we do anytime that comes across our desk is we do the due diligence to go through and check recordings, check times when a call is answered, when that call is dispatched, how many times a call taker tries to retransmit the location of that caller. So all of that we can survey. However, we do not have the authority to make changes to policy and procedure. That would be your local agencies. If you have an issue with the sheriff's office, obviously we don't have authority to go in there and tell the sheriff's office how they need to be answering calls. What we can do is make sure that the network infrastructure is in place to receive all those calls, to make sure the equipment is up to date and refreshed and ready to go. Now, it's another 50-50 thing. If we provide the network and the equipment and the training, it's important that those answering agencies provide the time for, and we talked about it earlier, training your personnel. Making the time available to train personnel, and a lot of times in the communication industry, that's a challenge, to take people off shifts, to switch shifts. Sometimes you got people working 2-3 shifts at a time. It can get pretty ridiculous, but ultimately those changes have to come from those answering agencies, because the bottom line is if you don't pay them, you can't really dictate how they work.
But again, I think the public can help you in leveraging some of that, because if I lived in a community that had terrible outcomes for that, I mean, I would be holding my elected officials responsible for that. But I have no idea where those, if I live in that community or I don't live in that community.
And that is where it becomes our responsibility to relay that information and let you guys know of, because the situation remains the same. I live in rural Hidalgo County, and so the service that you receive would be the service that I receive or anybody else. And we want to make sure that regardless of who's making that 911 call, they know why it's working, and if it's not, what we can do to improve that. And so we will definitely work towards that. Thank you.
Okay, and then the only last is maybe looking at public service announcements on television.
Okay.
And I know we talked about the cable, but you know, that may be another strategy to help with education.
Absolutely. I think public service announcements we'll be looking at running on cable TV. We do currently have PSAs running in our Cinemark movie theaters. So that was a step forward that we took, but obviously moving forward, the larger dissemination of information we get to the general public, the better off we're going to be. So transparency, we believe firmly in that. Any other questions or comments? I'll turn it back over to Mr. Gomez.
I just want to make a comment because wireline are a thing of the past. They're too expensive for the telephone companies to replace, so guess what? We're taking a step backwards to go forward. And wirelines are not going to exist here pretty soon. They're doing away with them, and fiber is going to be it, and you're going to have nothing but voice over IP. I've had a telephone line since I moved to the valley, but now when I get the phone and I listen to the dial tone, I know that it's not pure wireline. I've been changed to VoIP, and their central offices have already been changed, and that's just me, and I know it, and it hasn't been made public, so don't take my word for it, but I know that I've been told by the telephone companies that they're not going to upkeep the wire lines because they're too expensive to replace them. So this is one instance where in order to move forward, we're taking a step back. And like I says, that may not be the best way to go, but that's the way that they're going. That concludes our 911 presentation. Do you have any other questions? Thank you.